According to Argentina and Chile, the political history of Antarctica began when the Spanish government gave a conquistador all lands south of the Straits of Magellan, unintentionally claiming the undiscovered continent. Decades later, this undiscovered land was incorporated into the Spanish colony of Chile, which was grounds for the mentioned country's later claims. According to a Dutch sailor, in 1599, he blew off course and observed mountainous land at southern latitude 64. This account is highly debated, but if accurate, it was the first recording of Europeans viewing Antarctica, more specifically the South Shetland Islands. The Antarctic convergence was crossed by an English merchant in 1675. Following this, the Antarctic Circle was crossed by another Englishman. In 1819, the first verified discovery of the South Shetland Islands occurred. The same year the islands were discovered, a Spanish ship sunk nearby on its way to Peru, killing all 644 people on board. The first sighting of the Antarctic mainland is believed to be by a Russian ship, though this is disputed. Throughout the following decades, many non-scientific expeditions happened in the South Shetland Islands, with the economic purposes of finding good areas for sealing operations. Expeditions would slow as the seal population fell in the region. The early 40s saw three major scientific expeditions occur, discovering much of coastal Antarctica. These expeditions helped prove that a southern continent existed. 3 years later, the United Kingdom began claiming regions in the Ross Sea previously discovered by explorer James Ross. At the start of the 20th century, Argentina began its involvement in Antarctica with the purchase of a meteorological station. 1904 also saw the beginning of the Antarctic whaling industry. Major accomplishment for Antarctic discovery occurred when a British explorer made it within 97 miles of the South Pole before turning around. That accomplishment and many more highlighted the ongoing race to reach the South Pole in this time period. The race ended in 1911 when a Norwegian expedition reached the South Pole. Only a month later, a British expedition also attempting to reach the South Pole accomplished their mission, only for all 5 explorers to sadly die on the return journey. Years later, the last major Antarctic expedition, the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition, occurred. The same year, the United Kingdom changed wording of a previous claim to multiple islands near Patagonia to also include a large territory in Antarctica. This addition to their claim was to fuel the whaling industry around the continent. The UK would further its claims by claiming the entire Ross Dependency and appointing it to the Dominion of New Zealand. The aggressive actions being taken by the British caused the French to claim Adelie Land. The Norwegians, concerned about the English taxing their whaling industry, claimed Peter I Island and Queen Maud Land. This year was also when the first of 5 U.S. expeditions conducted by Richard E. Byrd occurred, mapping the continent by plane. These expeditions would continue until the 50s. In 1930, the UK would claim another large portion of Antarctica, which it would give to Australia, who would go on to incorporate it as the Australian Antarctic Territory. This claim overlapped with France and had an undefined border with Norway. Fortunately, both possible disputes were solved later in the decade with the help of the British. However, during the same year those disputes were solved, the Norwegian claim was disputed by Nazi Germany, the Germans calling the land New Swabia. To prove their ownership, the Germans led an expedition where they mapped over 100,000 square miles, dropping darts with swastikas every 16 miles. And Germany lost all claim to the territory after their defeat in World War II. 1939 brought both the beginning of World War II and United States interest in Antarctica. The U.S. conducted the United States Antarctic Expedition from 1939 to 1941, establishing 2 research bases. They were both evacuated due to American involvement in World War II. During this, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt attempted to claim part of Antarctica but never followed through. Chile took advantage of Europe's distraction in World War II to claim the Chilean Antarctic Territory. They claimed it under the principle of uti possidetis juris. This principle states that countries should inherit land owned by them as a colony before independence. And according to Chile, Spain claimed a large part of Antarctica and previously gave it to the Chilean colony. 3 years later, Chile's neighbor, Argentina, declared its rights to a portion of Antarctica and subsequently established the Argentine Antarctic sector. This claim overlapped with both the Chilean and British claim. In response to Argentine, Chilean, and German expansion in the region, the UK launched Operation Tabarin to establish a permanent presence in Antarctica. This operation would last until 1946. During the operation, the United Kingdom and Argentina would put up national symbols and flags in their disputed lands. In 1946, Argentina would alter its Antarctic claim. The borders of their claim would stay the same until present day. During the same year, United States interest in Antarctica was rekindled with Operation High Jump, establishing another research base. The defunct Operation Tabarin would provoke Chile to organize the first Chilean Antarctic expedition. Soon after, Chile and Argentina would sign an agreement for mutual protection and legal defense over their Antarctic territories, attempting to solidify their claims while making the English claim less legitimate. The British would also bring Royal Navy warships into the region. The action was fortunately more symbolic than escalatory. In 1948, negotiations for an international condominium over Antarctica started in an attempt to exclude the Soviets from the continent. Negotiations would fall through when the USSR declared interest in Antarctica in 1950. In a highlight of the tension between Latin America and the United Kingdom, Argentina would fire a machine gun over the heads of the British Antarctic Survey Team in Hope Bay. Another escalation in Antarctica occurred when the UK would submit 2 applications to the International Court of Justice attempting to invalidate the Latin claims. They both failed. In 1957 and 1958, the International Geophysical Year Conference occurred. It was a major scientific cooperation that led to the establishment of multiple permanent research stations. In the same period, the first overland expedition that completed a crossing across the continent occurred. Soon after, the Antarctic Treaty was formed. Signed by 12 countries, the treaty was created to prevent military conflict in the region during the height of the Cold War. The treaty banned military activity on the continent and allowed freedom of scientific investigation. The treaty also established Marie Byrd Land, named after American explorer Richard E. Byrd's wife. It is the largest unclaimed territory on Earth. The Antarctic Treaty is well known because it was the first arms control agreement of the Cold War. From the 1960s to 70s, Antarctic sightseeing became an industry. Organized mostly by Australian and New Zealand companies, tourists would sail or fly to the continent. At the same time, the long-running Norwegian and British whaling industry on the continent came to an end. Brazil would claim land in Antarctica after signing the Antarctic Treaty in 1975. This claim was based on the frontage theory, stating the ownership of each part of Antarctica belongs to whomever you would reach first when sailing in a straight line north of the continent. In 1978, the first documented baby born in Antarctica was born in Hope Bay to an Argentine mother. In a horrible turn for Antarctic sightseeing, 257 people died in a plane crash on a trip operated by Air New Zealand. This harmed the industry significantly, only recovering in the 90s. Another major step in Antarctic history was the Protocol on Environmental Protection to the Antarctic Treaty, later named the Madrid Protocol. This addition to the Antarctic Treaty, among many things, banned mineral extraction on the continent for 50 years and banned introduced species on the continent, with exception for humans. In 1997, a Norwegian explorer finished the first unassisted Antarctic solo crossing. Nowadays, climate change and environmental worries have taken up most discussion about Antarctica. Tourism around the continent has also been at record amounts.